Welcome back to the Drake and Josh podcast. My name is Joshua Sinus Infection Parker. This is Drake 16 Minutes Late Gooding.
Yep.
And I think we're gonna start that from now on. This is just another episode of the podcast, and hoping that we don't get copyright striked by the show that might have something to do with our name.
I don't think so. Your name is Josh. My name is Drake.
Exactly.
Drake and Josh. It seems pretty logical.
It does seem logical, doesn't it? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think we're fine.
Yeah. So today we're gonna be talking about why do we do this? Why are we here?
Why are you watching? Why are you listening to this right now?
Why? Literally.
Exactly.
So Josh, I'd like you to tell me about your why.
My why, my personal why.
Yeah,
that's very personal. You should buy me dinner first.
Why do you do these things?
Why do we do these things?
Yeah.
That's a great question, Drake. Because that's exactly what we're talking about today, is whys. And why having a why is so important. It's like Inception. It's multiple whys. But in all seriousness, though, having a why is extremely important, and I think that's something it's something that's so simple, but it's something that we skip out on a lot of times. And having that reason for doing something, and I don't just mean, hey, I'm going to clean up the dishwasher because my mom told me to. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. What we're talking about is, why, like your why for why you get up in the morning and go to work. You might have to, but what are you contributing to, and like what's the bigger picture there, and sort of a deeper connection to that. For me, what my why with this and with the podcast, or whether it's like the Facebook group that I do, or just like the coaching that I've done in the past, those things like that. Like my personal why and what I think about for why I'm doing these things is, I think about people that have so much potential, but they are always going to be inhibited by like things like mental health, or maybe poor societal standards, or a good social group, things like that. Like the mental and social aspects that are holding these people back, that they're not going to be able to. They're not that they aren't able to, but they won't achieve their maximum potential, right? Because of these factors. And so my why is helping people like that, and trying to push them forward and sort of unlock that point where they can break through their limiting beliefs or the limiting factors that help them sort of in that. And so that is something that helps me immensely, because it doesn't have to just do with myself, right? And that's another thing we might talk about is kind of having things to do with not just ourselves, but other people, helping others. So that's part of it. And I mean, but also as you know, like there's different whys we talked before we started this, of like vegetarianism, and how you have sort of a why with that. And so there's multiple facets of it, like for me, I also want to be a leader, and someone that people can look up to, a great example. So in all ways, so that motivates me to have be functionally fit with my body, to not let myself go with that, to have a lot of energy, to be happy, not to just to push myself, but to also be fulfilled, not to push myself to, and be miserable, but push myself and be happy about it, So those are at least two really big ones that help me a lot. What about you, Drake?
What about me? Well, I don't really care about people, so
that's good. It's good that we have some diversity.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. But
you're really embracing this whole asshole persona.
So I was actually talking with a friend for a couple hours the other night about this, and I realized, like, it probably will sound like kind of an asshole thing, but my why, like, I feel a sort of a duty to help people. Like with Greenhouse, we did all sorts of stuff with like raising, doing our little part, like raising food donations for homeless shelters and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but
makes you sound like an asshole.
I can't say that was because I felt bad. Like I don't really sit around being sad about the fact that there's homeless people, but I still feel like an obligation to help. What I sit around being sad about is the environment. I think a lot of that is because it or the animals that are a part of it don't really have a say in what we do to the environment. Like whales don't get to say, "Hey, please stop killing us. We don't want to go extinct," but like it's still gonna happen, you know. I think
We might be saying it just not in a language we understand.
that's true. Yeah, but like the whale population is down, and the blue whale population is down like 99% in the past couple hundred years or whatever since whaling became a thing. Not a particularly good thing. Coral reefs are dying. They're probably gonna, if things continue, like be completely bleached in the next like 25 to 50 years. Then when that happens, like within an extended period of time, those reefs, once they turn white, will start to rot and break down. Then you have like all of the fish that have a reef-based habitat, like where do they live when the reefs fall apart?
Yeah.
And also coral reefs are like living creatures. They're like communities of polyps and things like that. Or yeah, just islands covered in trash and plastic and all these
Or
things.
made of trash and plastic.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. So there's all these things that's what makes me sad, and that's like why I want to do things in the world, is to help out those just animals and the environment and stuff like that, because I've been able to see a lot of beauty in my life from the environment and scuba diving and stuff like that. And I know that even where I'm at is nothing like what I've seen is nothing like what people saw 25 or 50 years ago. Not even remotely the same. But where things are heading, like if I have children or adopt children or whatever, I would like them to be able to experience some of what I've experienced, and that really, depending on the time frame, is unlikely. And especially grandkids, like probably if things are continuing down this path, like scuba diving might not even be a thing because there might be nothing to see, and that's like a really sad thing to think about and really scary thing to think about. So I think that's why I don't have, like, people don't make me quite as sad, because I'm like, we as people have done all of these things to like the environment and to all of these creatures that have no way of defending themselves against us. Like, what are whales going to do against whalers? Like, they don't really have much of an option. So I think we've like used our superior intelligence to take advantage of life forms with less intelligence, or like, I don't know, that's sort of a long like tangential thing, but that's what motivates me, at least, is to figure out how can we reverse the damage we've already done, and then do everything we can to keep from doing more damage.
What's your brighter future that you envision? So let's say, like, those things you are able to make an impact on that, and then on the flip side is, you know, your kids do get to experience coral reefs, and you know those things do last. They flourish, that type of thing.
It's really hard to say, because this is another sort of sad thing, is that to actually look and think that there's a brighter future is somewhat difficult in this sector. In terms of like, oh, we're gonna have robots to do stuff for us and all that shit. Like, yeah, okay, that you could think that the world's gonna get better in that way, but to think that like the amount that needs to change in order for us to, like, okay, plastic, for example, you can't really get rid of plastic. You can burn it, and then the toxins go into the atmosphere and all that stuff. That's not good. It can break down, but then it's consumed by smaller organisms. Like, that's something in the ocean. If a plastic bottle gets into the ocean, floats around for a long time, if it's on the surface, it'll get broken down by the sun, but then it gets consumed by smaller things that are then consumed by bigger things, and then we end up getting plastic, by eating those fish and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, mercury levels have been a huge issue for a long
tuna,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there's a lot that needs to be done, and I haven't really quite come up with a plan to figure out how to fix these things. I mean, I know there's some technology being developed to break down plastics and turn them into fuel and other things. But there's a lot of issues. I mean, there's islands like Polynesian islands that are literally just filled with trash because there's no systems in place on these small islands to get rid of trash, but they're still now getting shipments in of like soda bottles and candy and all this shit that's just littering their islands with trash, because there's there's no infrastructure in place to get rid of the trash, but it just keeps piling up. I mean, there's two really interesting documentaries, Plastic Ocean and Chasing Coral, that are very, there might be some dramaticism going on there, but in general, like a visual, like I doubt they decided to take a Polynesian island and dump trash over the entire thing to get a visual for a documentary, probably an actual issue. I mean, I know I've seen it in the British Virgin Islands, where we were basically, there's a leeward side of every island and a windward side, which basically windward is the side of the island the wind pushes towards, and leeward is the side it pushes away from. So there was, in this one island, Virgin Gorda, I believe, there was a beach on the leeward side, and then it was a very short distance, about a quarter mile to the windward side over a little hill. So we went to the leeward side, we looked around, there's like pretty much no trash. It's like one of the most pretty beaches you could imagine, like white sand, beautiful, waves, palm trees, whatever, gorgeous. A quarter mile over, you can't see the sand because it's covered in trash.
Wow.
Like, just trash floating in from the ocean, like fishing nets and bottles and flip-flops and just every type of trash you can imagine. You literally couldn't touch the sand on the other side of the island because of how much trash there was. Seeing stuff like that, it's like, damn, okay, something needs to change here.
Yeah.
Because we're literally destroying, like, you can argue about global warming. It's not something I've done a ton of research on. You can argue that that's like shifts in climate due to just natural changes in the world or whatever. That doesn't matter. Not that it doesn't matter.
I know what you're saying, though.
Yeah.
It
whereas,
matters,
like, plastic, like, you can see an island covered in trash, and it's like, that's definitely our fault. Like, as human beings, that's not an environmental cause or anything like that. That's something that we have done. Or diving in, like, the Galapagos is supposed to be, like, one of the most remote and beautiful places in the world, where Darwin did all of his research and all that stuff. Diving in the Galapagos, there's still, like, Coke bottles in the reefs, That's not cool. That's another issue I have with, like, corporatism and companies and stuff like that, is you have Coca-Cola, which is, like, coming out here saying, oh, yeah, we're such a good company because we do diversity training, and they sent out this whole thing instructing their employees to be less white because it's a dangerous thing to be white. Literally, I'm not making that up. Go look it up. And, like, saying, like, we're this woke, fantastic company because we care about diversity and we train our employees. And it's like, okay, what about, like, the 110 billion plastic bottles you made last year that are going to litter the earth forever? What about Mexico, where 24,000 people die annually from sugar-related deaths, like overconsumption of sugar-related deaths, and Coca-Cola products are consumed, like they make up 70% of, like, the sweets market and sugar market there.
Water, apparently it was just in the past, like, year or two, I think, water just passed Coke being the most consumed liquid in Mexico.
Yeah.
How nuts is that?
Yeah.
Coke is more than water.
So that like, all of these things tie together to be like, okay, like, in my entrepreneurship class, last week's assignment was on company culture. We're talking about culture, and one of the examples was like, oh, Coca-Cola's culture of diversity. I'm like, I don't give a crap about your diversity training when you're destroying the environment. Like, it doesn't really cool, you told your employees to be less white, to be woke or whatever, but you're still destroying the environment and, like, doing all these horrible things. So that's another one of the things that I want to figure out how to combat, but I don't really know how to. Like, another thing you could look at is fast food. If all the fast food chains just magically disappeared one day, is the world worse off? Like, if all of those buildings just vanished and that land went back to being empty and whatever, or all these, like, soda companies, and if they just didn't exist anymore, would the world be worse off? Probably not. Definitely not, I think. So that's another thing to think about, like, corrupt companies, not in the sense of, like, oh, I hate billionaires suck, but, like,
Popular opinion, by the way.
it is a popular opinion. It's not my opinion, though. I think billionaires are pretty cool. Just putting it out there, But I'm just kind of rambling. But yeah, these are the things that I care about and things that I want to tackle in life.
What's good to extrapolate from what you're talking about is that it's not just, I mean, I like the environment's pretty cool, is that you're educated about, you've really taken time to go explore what you care about. So you're not just someone that's, like, screaming about something they don't know about, right? Which has, is good intentioned, but it's counterproductive in the long run.
Right.
And
it does take seeing those things firsthand, and I think that's one of the reasons why your why is so deeply connected to you is because of personal experience. And it's the same here. I didn't care, like I cared about nature, but I didn't care about the environment until I went out and spent 3 months living on a boat and was like, oh wow, okay, there's like, go to this beautiful Polynesian island, and I didn't see the island that was like completely covered in trash as in this documentary, but even Tahiti, like walking around there, just piles of trash in the streets. We walked around there for a day before it was our last day before I flew home, and there's just piles of trash all over the place in the streets, in people's yards. It's disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
Being out in the literally closer. We were out on our Pacific crossing, like closer to the International Space Station than we were to land, and you still see plastic bottles floating by in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Or like diving the Galapagos, seeing Coke bottles in reefs, like stuff like that, just like really opened my eyes. Or just seeing like bleached reefs, like diving on a reef that's just dead. Like if the way I've heard it explained is like if the Amazon rainforest, if all the trees in the Amazon rainforest started turning white and falling over, people would be pretty concerned about that. But that's exactly what's happening in coral reefs with like mass bleaching events and stuff like that.
Which as far as like area covered, right, is a massive piece, right? That's being bleached and killed off. It's also a huge part of biomes, like you talked about. No, that's not necessarily the point, although it is like that is a really big issue. But what I want to point out here is that you have very specific things about this why, right? Lots of different reasons, lots of different examples. Also, there's something that's called association, right? Where you think of a picture or something, or it might be a smell or a taste or whatever, some sort of maybe a memory that associates you with a particular emotion. And so you have all these different examples in your mind of things that when you think about them, you become associated with some sort of emotion that says, yeah, no, that's not okay, and then that motivates you forward.
Right.
So that's something that can be really, really powerful that other people can kind of glean from this. Is you have a lot of different examples of that, right? If maybe one day you're like, you know what, I haven't really, I'm not so sure about coral reefs. The Amazon forest, that's another example. That's something super, that's a huge issue,
Yeah.
So you have like redundancies, which is great, and they're kind of stack on top of each other as more and more reasons. Because life can really suck.
Yeah.
So you need a lot of these different reasons to be able to pull you out of some of these issues, and so that's a great point that you brought up, and something to think about for sure.
Here's a question for you: does having a why make you happier or sadder or more sad? Like when you think about it, and when you think about the scale and scope of the problem, does it excite you or strike fear?
I think that this is most often a subconscious decision, but potentially a conscious decision that you make. And it depends what your focus is on. And I think it's the difference between being sort of solution-oriented and solution-focused rather, or problem-focused. I think we have a lot of people that really care about the environment. A lot of people that care about racial diversity. A lot of people care about, all these different big, controversial things, and that's fantastic. The unfortunate part of it, especially being compounded by social media, is that when you're spewing hate about, or even on a smaller scale, just saying, hey, yeah, I don't like how this is, but you don't give any sort of alternative or any sort of solution, then you're just contributing towards negativity. Right. You're not actually solving anything, right? And I think that one of the biggest, especially on the side of human behavior and what contributes towards feeling helpless or depressed, is when you when you care deeply about something that you don't feel like you have any control over. And so especially in big issues now, where more and more people are becoming aware of these big issues because we're all connected, right? Is that with things like that, with mass, like suicide rates, issues with like the environment, like for instance, and or racial discrimination, things like that. It can seem like some of these things are such massive issues that it's like, oh, how do I even make a difference? But the problem with that is that when things are going good in the area, maybe new technology comes out and it's like, oh, hey, this is actually really great. Now we can use, Coke bottles. But the issue is that the rate of, transferring that to, a better, a more biodegradable substance is so ridiculously low, it's going to take 300 years to make even a dent in it.
Well, here's the other thing, though. A lot of those biodegradable plastics take an incredibly long time to biodegrade.
Exactly.
So they will biodegrade over time, which is a good start. But I mean, like, you just use cans, like, metal is not an issue. Like,
but then the context isn't as important as far as, like, when an improvement is made in that area,
right?
Then you'll feel good.
Yeah.
But with these big issues that are currently issues that have been compounding over hundreds of years, potentially, in some cases, then the times where you're going to feel good at an improvement being made is going to be, few and far between.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be feeling that detriment. But if you decide that and this is what I urge people to do, especially in cases like I was just talking to someone recently about human behavior and sort of like the dynamics between men and women and kind of like things that might need to change as like real, like solutions or what the real problems are, anything like that, right? And I think that one person choosing to act differently or act, in a better way or take the high route. And it's the same thing within the environment, right? One person at a time using, cans instead of plastics, for instance. Like that is how we change things because, on a corporate level is they're making the decision based off of what the consumer wants as also as far as like what's going to lower or increase profit margins, things like that. So if more and more people do say, hey, I only want cans, right? Then that's going to be less and less incentivized. Now, is that going to take forever? Yes, it's going to take a long time. But also these massive problems that took generations to come up with and amount to generally don't just dissipate in overnight,
No,
So
definitely not.
It takes the collective. But my point with all of this is saying, hey, I might not be able to fix this all by myself, but the small amount that I can fix is worth me making that effort to.
Right.
It's worth me paying an extra 25 cents or 50 cents for a better alternative for what I consume. And then that sets a new standard for the people around you. People say, you know what, dude, you're right. That's not a big deal. I can do that.
Yeah,
I might not be able to change the world, but I can at least change this
It's
part
very
of my
difficult
behavior.
to, especially with like plastic consumption.
Yeah.
Like to say that you're not going to use single-use plastic, like have fun getting milk or eggs or, I mean, there's like, okay, you can try and find eggs that have a cardboard container or try and search for milk that's in a glass jar or whatever. And there are obviously solutions. I'm sure there's somewhere local where you could get like glass jars of milk and go and get the glass jar refilled from the farm or whatever. Like I'm sure that's a solution, or I'm sure that's a viable alternative, but it's that those alternatives are not accessible. And the other issue is that any alternative on scale becomes difficult to manage. So plastic bags were like, plastic bags, because now we don't have to use paper bags, so we don't have to cut down trees. But now it's like, okay, now we have these plastic bags that are going to be in the world forever. I mean, killing all the trees is not a good solution, and creating hundreds of millions or billions of plastic bags every year is also not a really good solution. So like, how do we move forward there? I don't know if it was IKEA or somewhere started packaging their appliances and stuff in appliances or kits for building tables or whatever that is, in a mushroom foam where it like biodegrades in 2 or 3 weeks. Like you can just put it, like it's styrofoam, but you put it out in your yard and it'll biodegrade and just like plant mushrooms in your yard. I don't think
that's awesome.
Yeah, really neat stuff like that. But
I don't know why I thought that was so funny. It's just like the visual of it, as it's just...
the reason I asked you that though is because I do like what you're saying. With these problems, it tends to be overwhelming, and it's hard to figure out a path forward, especially with something that's as massive as the problem of environmental stuff or plastic pollution or the things that you're working on. Like, incredibly daunting. I mean, if you read
Very.
with education, if you read, I mean, you did read. We talked about outwitting the devil
Yeah.
in one of the first things that we did. Or maybe did we even put that one up? Was that the one that we did and we didn't put up?
I think we didn't put that one up.
Yeah. Well, in that one, we might have discussed back in when was that written? Early 1900s or something like that.
Yeah. In the 1930s, I think.
He was discussing these issues with the education system that were identical to what we discussed today. And it's like, okay, 90 years later, and these issues are still identical to what this guy is describing in the 1930s, you know?
And also the thing is, and this is particular to that context, is that as I've done more and more research into the decisions made that have led us to here, the more and more disconcerting the situation seems, the more and more hopeless it seems, and the more, because it's so deeply entrenched in, you know, whether politics or misrepresentation or just things like that. And it's just really unfortunate. And to me, it seems like this is such a clear solution. Like it's almost like, how is this still an issue if it's like it almost seems obvious, but that's naive to think though, because there are specific reasons hidden in that.
Well, it's just very ingrained.
Exactly, it is very, very ingrained. But I mean that's an example though. But just I mean more on what your question was, is that I think it's just so dangerous to get so connected or so invested in these massive problems. I think it's important, right? Especially in like places like America, for instance, where you know the vast majority of people can survive, you know, like we're not, you know, not everyone is in like the fight or flight thing, although not to diminish from the people that are, but you know, us people that are able to, you know, conceptualize and have the luxury of being able to think outside of our immediate situation. I think that's a gift and that's fantastic, but I also think that we're making ourselves miserable by just completely be completely fixated with the exclusion of all else on what the problem is and saying, hey, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem.
Or just that being your solution is to post about it on social media and say, this world sucks because of this problem, and I'm doing my part by posting about it on social media. Like, you're not doing jack shit by posting about it on social media.
So you know, educate yourself. You know, become a, you know, an authority in that space. If, you know, if anything, just by being knowledgeable about it,
right?
You know, and saying, and by giving proper information and examples, and because people screaming global warming is not helping anybody.
Yeah.
Because there's so much, like, because on either side, there's the people that are fanatical about it, and there's people that are against it, saying, yeah, well, like, where's your hard proof? You know, so like, be educated about it, all those things. Not specific on that, a little bit of a tangent, but it's also, I think there is a lot to extrapolate from that, as far as what you deeply care about, and also what I deeply care about, and what kind of reminds us and keeps us focused, because everyone has ups and downs, right? Like, I just had a sinus infection, I went through this cleanse thing, it freaking floored me, you know, for the past like week and a half or so, and but you know, I mean, I still think about, like, even in a lower state, you know, I'm still thinking, I'm like, man, there's something I can do about these issues, you know.
So let's talk about this. So you said that there are times, and I can relate to this, when you're sitting in bed and you're like, I need to get up, and you think about all of like your why, that education system and everything, but it's still not enough. So what does it take to like discover or rediscover that, at least in your experience, to rediscover that sort of like bit of, I don't know, spark to get you going again?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is, and I've said this before in different podcasts, but I would say this is true for myself. I forget the guy's name again. Russell. What is the guy's last name?
Russell Brand.
Russell Brand. Yeah, I'm gonna say this exact same quote as I did before, because I do think that it's so incredible. Is we need to get a different table here. This one's like moving around and stuff. But he talks about how, you know, with addiction and things like that, where the temptation and that battle, it starts well before you're actually like really fighting it, right? Because by the time you're struggling with yourself to get yourself out of bed, then like I really believe then you're already losing the battle, you know, because how many times on the first time when it's like, oh my gosh, like, no, I'm not getting out of bed, screw that, you know, like how many times on the first time it's like, no, get out of bed, okay, yep, I'm up,
yeah,
like that doesn't happen, you know, it's like you're sitting there like dude, get out of bed. What are you doing? You're going to be, all these things until finally you are absolutely going to be late for work or late for whatever, or I don't know.
I'm watching Westworld and it's productive because I care about AI.
Oh my God. Yeah, but I think that you give yourself allowances. I think that it's much more rare that it happens when you're on fire 100%, and then all of a sudden the next morning you wake up and it's like, oh, man, like it just overnight it just all kind of left. I do think that it might happen over 2 days or 3 days, or maybe just the evening, right, where you feel great and then something happens, you're in a lower state, and then you go to bed and you're like, oh man, maybe I'll just sleep in tomorrow. No, I shouldn't do that, And then you wake up and you're like, oh man, I don't want to get out of bed. Oh my God, screw this, And so it's like these things really matter, this progression of it. And I think it's so important to be so vigilant in the very beginning so that you don't have a hard time. I mean, you're going to have a hard time. What's the dude? Navy SEAL.
David Goggins. Or Jocko Willink.
Jocko Willink talks. He said even him, like super, super diligent guy, super disciplined is what I meant to say. He says, yeah, I have a hard time getting out of bed 50% of the mornings.
Yeah, David Goggins said pretty much exactly the same thing.
Yeah, but it's such an important distinction there is because at no point are you going to reach this magical thing of like everything's easy.
I wish.
And if you do reach that point of everything's easy, then you're going to be bit in the ass because then you're going to be not fulfilled because you're not growing,
So when...
Did that answer the question?
Sort of. Well, no. So I guess like when you lose that, when it doesn't, when it's not enough, like it usually is not a 1 day excursion. Like for me, it's sort of been the past week and a half or so that things have been off, and then I had a really good conversation, and that sort of like sparked things up a little bit, but it didn't kick me the full way into gear until like yesterday.
I'm about to cough. I don't have COVID.
And it literally happened like I said that thing about Westworld because that's like something that I've been really into like the past week and a half, and it's just been
you like Westworld.
It's been so fascinating because like wow, like this technology, like I wonder how these things could be implemented in the real world, or how far away we are from this, and it's like sort of makes me question and be inquisitive, and it's interesting. So I've been like, oh, it's like kind of productive, not really, but like at least I'm thinking, and it's been interesting or whatever. And yesterday I was like sitting there and I was like watching this, and I was like, wait, why am I doing this? Not that it's not interesting or well done or whatever, but I just closed my laptop, I walked over to the piano or the keyboard, and I just started like playing something that was inspired because I was like listening to the intro, and I was like, the Westworld intro is like one of the coolest, most well done like TV show intros. Do you know what I'm referencing? Yeah, with like the song, and then just the way it's done is so beautiful. And I was like, I'm gonna go like write something that's like inspired by that. And then just that little thing of just like putting that down for a second and just going and like removing myself and just being inspired for just momentarily. But it was like a 5-minute period where like maybe I should like go sit down at the piano and like
Here's
work
a
on
question,
something.
though.
Maybe not. And then I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go do this. And then that like set me in motion to
Did your creativity come from stopping watching a show, right, and saying, no, I'm gonna go be productive, I'm gonna go sit down at the piano, then you get in a creative state, and then you play something or create something, whatever that is, or did you watching a bit of Westworld get you associated into a creative state, and then when you went to go play piano, then you were in the right state to create something?
It's really, I mean, this isn't quite related to the why thing, but it's more maybe a combination of the both. It's not leaving that situation, but it's being able to just put that, because like when you're invested or involved, right, you're like, oh, I'll just wait till the end of the episode. But with something like Westworld, it's like an hour long. So it was like taking that momentary creative inspiration or spark, and rather than sitting on it, just like stopping what you're doing and like going and doing that, whatever that is, right in that moment. And I think that can be very beneficial, is like when you have like a bit of an impulse to do something, or a bit of a creative spark, but it requires you putting something down to go and do it. Like, especially so for me, like music is something that sort of comes and goes in terms of like how inspired I am to write or create. And so if I'm working on a school assignment and I have an idea for something musical, it's going to be more beneficial for me to just drop what I'm doing and go and like do that thing, work on that piece of music or whatever. And that's what with this, like I was just like, the Westworld intro is such a beautiful, like cool, like piano thing. And I was like, I wonder if that one progression I wrote a while back could be implemented to like do something similar to that, and like maybe something orchestral type. That'd be kind of a cool song idea. And then a couple minutes go by and I'm like, maybe I should go work on that. And then a couple more minutes go by and I'm like, and I don't know what it was. I was just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go work on that. And I just closed my laptop and go and then they're just set in motion. Like, okay, then I did that for a while. I wrote this piece kind of like inspired by the Westworld intro, and then I went and had a meeting with my team for 5 or 6 hours, and then came home and I was doing, working on business stuff until like 2 a.m. last night. And it just like set in motion this like creative energy that then translated into productivity and whatever, and just got me out of this like lazy mental state.
Yeah.
But all of that, and then it was really like I'd also been feeling kind of uninspired with the business and stuff, because like we had talked about, basically I like had these ideas for these things, and then the two of like the competitors in that space rolled out exactly what I'd been saying, like, oh, I'm going to do this in this space because I'm going to have this market advantage because, these two things. And then
he's trying so hard to be completely general and non-specific. It's funny.
Then these competitors come out and they're like, look at our new things that we're introducing on our platforms. And I'm like, wow, that's exactly what I was going to do. So that was kind of like discouraging and sort of set me kind of away from like my motivation in that space. But then just going and sitting down and having a meeting, talking about it and figuring out, like pivoting basically and figuring out what's our next strategy. Now we talked about it for like an hour before this, obviously there's a lot of,
I mean, like I said before, you can use that as like a motivator, because it's like, oh, hey, I'm on track, like the best of the best are working on these types of products and projects. And you're in a similar, mindset.
And there's definitely two ways to look at that. There's that way, or there's the way of like, oh my gosh, like my idea is ruined now because, but here's the other thing though.
That's your focus, man. I'm telling you.
The why.
That's one of those things of like, that's where the battle starts, because you totally could have been like, oh my gosh, like maybe this thing is even like worth doing. Like they took my idea, they stole it. Like that was mine.
They got in my head.
They're listening, dude.
But it was literally like, I was like, wow, these solutions seem so obvious in this sector that why isn't anyone doing them? And then it was like, oh, like 2 weeks later, these big companies are now doing those things. And I was like, okay, well, I guess it makes sense because those things made sense. But now it's like, got to think farther outside the box. But in this general theme, so we talked a little bit about your why versus your how, and like your how can change, but your why should probably stay the same. Or if it's really deep why, your why will stay the same, but not to be too attached to your solutions or your hows or whats or whatever.
Absolutely. And the example that I gave you before was like the first business venture thing that actually both of us, we did was legacy tech. And we talked about that in the failures, embracing failure. But that was a really big step for all of us. And I think about back then because writing goals down every day, that was part of the practice. And some of those goals are still the same, even though the how, as far as what how I'm achieving those things, is drastically different. Before it was being significantly with like technology. And that was the main focus, and like creating new things to be able to empower people, or be able to fill certain or create solutions. Whereas now those solutions come through education, providing like additional support for people, make shifts with whether societal or structural or systemic changes, and so that's what I look to now, because just a reprioritization. Now that came through a lot of different episodes of my life, and so what was great though is because I had such a strong why of making a shift towards a better future for people. Then that stayed consistent, and that's something that I still care about today, and something that I still am working on. It's just that it's significantly different, but I'm still achieving, the same thing.
Right.
It's just different of how I'm going to get that. And even in, like I told you before, before we started this, we're talking about entrepreneurship and how you're like making pivots. And someone, author of the book that I'm reading right now, it's called Your Next 5 Moves. Anyways, he talks about how entrepreneurship is never a straight line. And or no, it was Kevin O'Leary that said that. And so entrepreneurship is never a straight line, but a lot of things are not a straight line, and so it's you're kind of always, but you need to have that end goal. What's kind of gravitating you towards that?
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. And something that I talked to you a little bit about is sometimes you have to, you can shift a goal or something you want to do to fit in with your why if it wasn't originally. So the sectors that I've been working in over the past year, like with Greenhouse, that was music. With this is also music related. But with Greenhouse, I have a guy, the graphic designer who's been working on basically taking the Greenhouse logo and making sort of like an emblem that has like the ocean and a mountain in it, whatever. And that's supposed to be like the general ethos behind everything that I want to do in the future, is that no matter which sector I'm exploring or working in, it all needs to come back to the environment and nature and like helping preserve things and better the world and whatever. That's from great. Those environmental perspectives. But like music doesn't seem super directly related to that, right? Like doing live streams or shows or whatever wasn't directly related to helping the environment. But there was a longer term vision there with like doing a music festival and doing all these things that would hopefully impact the environment positively. But I guess recently I've been trying to reassociate the how with the why. Like I know what I want to do and I know, it's in the music industry and whatever, but how can I reassociate that to make sure that it's still in line with
like what you're currently working on?
Yeah, what I'm currently working on. And how can I still align that with, what I want to do with the environment? And another thing we talked about, so I was thinking the other day about like, why is it so hard to stick to a diet for a long period of time? Because I've had to do stuff where like, I'm going to only eat like whole foods, like I'm not going to have anything processed and whatever, and it works for a little while, and then it's like becomes really impractical and whatever. And then I thought about it, and I was like, wait a second, I've been a vegetarian 3 times, once for 4 years, and then over the summer I just decided like, I'm just going to be a vegetarian for a little while. It wasn't like a permanent decision. And then in October I decided again to go back to being a vegetarian, but this time definitely more of like a permanent thing. And it's never been like a struggle in terms of temptation, which is very different from a standard. Like if you say I'm not going to eat whole foods, or I'm only going to eat whole foods, and then your mom's like, oh, I just made this whatever, or like, oh, I just got ice cream from Fox Meadows for the house and whatever. It's like, oh, maybe like, like maybe I could just skip it for today, like that sounds nice. And it's because there's no deeper, I believe at least, there's the why isn't quite as strong there, especially for someone like maybe you or I who's already in decent shape. Like we're not at the rock bottom level of a health where we're like, oh my gosh, I need to make a change or I'm going to get diabetes or I'm going to die or whatever. Like we're not in that like really low state. So our why based on just personal needs isn't quite as deep. Whereas with the vegetarianism thing, it's like a moral thing. And so since the day, specifically since October, since the day that I decided, okay, I was just eating a piece of chicken because I was like working out a lot, and I was like, okay, I gotta have like lean meat and whatever. So I was like making chicken for lunch, and I was eating it, and I was like, wait, this is gross, I can't do this. So I finished it, and I was like, I'm done eating meat. And since then, it's like there's zero temptation to go back to it, which is very different than any other experience I've had with any sort of like diet or self-control thing. Is that it literally was this switch that just in an instant got flipped in my head, and there's just no going back after that. It's like, wow, okay, I can't. And I think you can find ways to associate goals with health and personal goals and whatever to that deeper why, even if it doesn't quite make sense. Like for being a vegetarian, it makes sense with the fact I care about animals and stuff like that. And so my thought there, kind of gruesome, but like if someone came to me and was like, hey, do you want bacon for breakfast? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. And so they hand me a pig and a handgun, and they're like, hey, make bacon.
Holy
like,
shit.
No, there's no way I'd be able to. Would you be able to do that? Like,
I don't know, man. I like bacon a lot. I would never be able to do that.
Exactly. So that's like the thought process that went through my head, and that's how that like works with my why of like caring about
That's a pretty
animals.
crazy visualization, man.
It is, but like
yeah.
anybody I ask that to, and I'm not like militant about it. Like I don't
Yeah.
care. Like I'm not trying to convince other people to do what I'm doing. It just is. It works for me because that's what
But
my
at the same
why
time,
is.
you tell people that, yeah.
It's just it's a thought experiment
Yeah,
because people
yeah,
are like,
yeah.
oh, it's
It's a
stupid. And
good
I'm like-
thought experiment,
And I'm
though.
like,
That's a
okay,
really
well,
good point.
could you take responsibility? Like if that's what it came down to, or like is the value, anyways. But
Makes no sense.
Another thing that I've recently implemented is like I'm not going to buy food because I was like, okay, how can I like really improve my health? And I was thinking about it in a way like in relation to this idea of associating a why with like a habit. So with the vegetarianism thing, it hasn't been difficult at all because just like it was a decision that I made and there's no temptation to go back from that. So I'm thinking like what's something that's very very common with a lot of unhealthy food, like fast food or just unhealthy shit. It's like, okay, well, it's always wrapped in plastic. And I was like, okay, well, plastic pollution is a horrible thing. And so I'm like, okay, well, I just won't buy things that use single-use plastic in their packaging. And that just eliminates so much unhealthy stuff right away. And it's like something where, again, it's not been a question since I made that decision because I care about that thing that I'm associating that habit with. So even though it might not make sense, like if you think about like how could you deciding not to eat, crappy foods have to do with helping the environment? And on first, I don't know, thought maybe it doesn't, but then you can sort of search for a way to incorporate that deeper why into that habit, and then it becomes much easier because when you think about it, it's not about like the original thought process would have been like, oh, should I eat this thing that's unhealthy, or should I go out with my friends and get fast food or whatever because we're all hanging out at late. And then I'm like, well, I'm in pretty good shape. Like I've been working out, I've been running, like burning calories. I have a high metabolism. Like it can't do much harm to me. But now it's not about doing harm to me. It's about like, okay, if you go to Dunkin' Donuts and get that coffee right in that plastic cup is going to be on the planet forever, for a very, very long time. If it gets to the ocean, it'll break down. Fish will eat it. If not, it'll stay in a landfill. That's gross. Like, it's not cool.
If you do any of that, you're a terrible person.
No, but
Just kidding.
but it's just like I think if you're able to associate these I don't know how you could associate if you're struggling with a habit, how you'd be able to associate your why. But that's my thought process as to how I can make a habit sort of deeper, or more deeply ingrained in my psyche or whatever, is by morphing it into like translating it into a way that makes sense with my deeper cares, basically. Or if you're more into the like humanitarian end of things, like you could probably look at all the things that certain companies are doing that harm their employees, or if you're looking at fast food companies, or I don't know, like candy companies that use immoral labor from other foreign countries or whatever, it's probably easier to get yourself to stop consuming those things or to change that habit if you're thinking about the humanitarian aspect of what are those companies doing that are immoral. And then it might be you might then find a solution or find a company that's not doing those things and whatever. It's by no means a perfect solution, but it is a much easier way to eliminate, like, think about all of pretty much anything unhealthy that you could eat. Think about if it's wrapped in plastic or not. Like, not everything is going to be wrapped in plastic, but like the majority of those things are. Like, yeah, okay, you could drink soda out of cans instead of bottles and you still can drink soda, but for the most part, a lot of things are just eliminated right away if you say we're not using single-use plastic. So that's like the thought process that I've gone through in order to use my why to like shift my thinking about particular habits. So I don't know if there's any experiences you've had that are like that, or like figuring out like, okay, you're really hammering at this particular habit you want to form or particular change you want to make in your life, and it's not happening. And maybe the reason it's not happening is because you haven't associated it deeply with that thing that you want to change in the world or care about so much.
I'm going to come back to the question, because I think there is a lot to unpack on like what you were saying there, and some really important things that I think that they can benefit a lot from. Maybe not everyone is going to care about the environment as much as you or the humanitarian aspect, but there's still a lot that they can improve from that. Like, for instance, identity. and you were talking about how you being a vegetarian, and how those decisions just became so much easier for you once you kind of said, well, yeah, I'm a vegetarian. Like I'm not gonna do that. And because you care about those animals, then that made it so much easier for you. But and I'm gonna write something down because I don't want to forget it.
And here's one other distinction with that is, I think we talked about this in one of the other episodes where we talked about like how everybody has something they care about, and rather than being mad at people that they don't care about the thing that you care about, support them in caring about the thing that they do care about and taking action there. Because if everybody just decided that they have their why or whatever and they're going to act towards it, like it doesn't matter that your why is different than my why. If we're both acting towards them, we're both going to be improving our worlds in some way or another. And honestly,
we have very different whys.
And it doesn't matter. There's no there's no shame. Like I'm not looking at you and being like, oh, you're horrible because you're not a vegetarian or whatever. Like I genuinely don't care. I don't care at all because I care about like me personally, like what I care about myself more than you. No, I care about
you should.
What my why is, and because it relates personally to me, but there's no wrongdoing in that why isn't shared by you. Just like I would be annoyed if you were mad at me because I don't care as deeply about the education system as you do, like
exactly.
Anyway, sorry, that was
No, you're totally fine.
Continue.
But so my point with identity though is identity is one of the single most pivotal sort of contributing factors to why we do the things that we do. If you think about like, what would you say if I hand you a cigarette right now and say, hey, you want to smoke?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I say no. I've never indulged in cigarettes. Or
why? Why haven't you?
Because part of my identity is that I don't consume substances, and I never have.
Wait, tell me exactly what I wanted to hear. No, you say, hey, I'm not that kind of person. Like I don't smoke. That's just not me. I'm sorry. I don't care,
it's like I haven't. That's something that is very important to me, and that I have not vaped or smoked or done anything like that.
You're not tempted by it.
No, not even in the slightest.
Exactly. And so, but everyone has things like that where it's like, no, I'm sorry, that's just not me. And it's not like, oh man, like. He has a cigarette right in his hand. I don't know. Should I do it? Should I not? It's like it's not even. It doesn't tax your willpower at all, right? That decision, because it's part of your identity that you just don't smoke. And we can do things like that, like you're talking about, how you have that ingrained in your identity, how it just becomes so easy. And I love what you said also as far as now having habits that support that, because we are constantly giving ourselves reasons for why we believe these things, right? If you say, listen, I every day get up at 4:30 in the morning, no matter what. That is just me. That's just what I do, right? When you wake up in the morning for whatever time it is for whoever, and that's not me right now because I've definitely been sleeping in because I've been sick. But anyways, but that was me for a long time. And so, well, if you think about it, this is a really great example. If I say, hey, let's go for lunch, man. Let's go for lunch. And then you show up at the designated time, and either I'm really late or I don't show up at all, right?
16 minutes late.
No. Or, say I don't show up at all.
Yeah.
And then maybe, that night I text you, hey, man, I'm super sorry this thing came up. And maybe the first time you're like, you know what? I've known Josh for a while, whatever, And then the next week I say, hey, man, you want to go for lunch? You're a little apprehensive, and you're like, oh, fine, whatever. I'll go to lunch. Please just be there, And then again, I don't show up. Right? How many times is it going to take you to be like, Josh isn't reliable?
Yeah.
Right? We do the same exact thing with ourselves, where we snooze the alarm. And then all of a sudden we say, I'm unreliable, or I don't get out of bed, or that's not me. Like every single, because when we talk to people and we say, hey man, why don't you get up on time? You're like, oh, man, I just always snooze my alarm. Like we're telling ourselves we always snooze our alarm. So we're constantly giving ourselves reasons and supporting these parts of our identity, right? But it takes, when you get to that point where it's like, you know what, enough. This is not me. This is not who I am. I need to do this. Then you make that change, right? And that's one of the crazy things about being in that middle ground of being just good enough or being just okay, is you're not feeling that pain of being way on the downside of something, or being really crappy at something, or being made fun of for something, whatever that is. And then that's really what gets people to change. So that's a point there where kind of, at least how I see what you're talking about with part of your identity.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it in that sense, but that also, is that my part of your why can really become your identity in the sense that
100%.
I'm someone who cares about the environment and animals and all this stuff. So am I acting in line with those particular cares? And yeah, I mean, there's definitely situations no, I knew for the longest time when I wasn't a vegetarian, I knew that I didn't quite like it, but if I didn't think about it, it's fine. And that's something that's funny because I posed
now you very much think about it. You think about hey, I'm gonna, if I have the handgun in the right there.
But I posed that to my dad, and I was like, okay, is your enjoyment, we live in a world where you can get fake meat products Beyond Sausage, whatever, made out of pea protein.
The Impossible Whopper.
Good. It's good. It honestly is.
Have you had it?
Yeah. It's. I mean,
have you had the actual thing though?
A real. I don't know that I've ever had an actual Whopper.
Exactly.
But I grew up eating meat. I know what meat tastes like. It's fantastic. I love it. But, So I posed my dad with that same question, and he was like, honestly, no, my enjoyment of meat is not more valuable than the life of an animal, but I like meat and I don't really want to think about it. And I was like, I was like, that's fair. Honestly, that's fair. If you can admit that, but then there's other people that I've talked to that just come up with endless excuses for one would be Adelie, who's on here. She's religious. So a lot of religious people be like, oh, well, God created animals for us to, for us, they're ours to do with what we please and whatever, and I'd like to argue against that. But anyways, if that's not, I don't know where I'm going with this. But
we're talking about identity. And,
it's just something you can identify with something and still not be true to it. Mm-hmm. I've known for a while that I identify with caring about animals and all this stuff, and yet I still for a while was in a situation where I was just I'd rather not think about this because right now eating meat, I'm trying to work out a lot. I need protein. It's really simple just to have.
So rather you identify with it and you do care about it, but there's something that supersedes that.
Yeah.
You just said that you grew up eating meat. You love meat.
Yeah.
But you don't eat meat right now. So there's been a switch of prioritization of what is most important to you.
Right. And all of that, the whole vegetarianism came from, I went hunting once when I was maybe 12. I went boar hunting with my granddad and my dad and my brother. And
did you have fun?
Oh my gosh.
Or was it a boar?
It was a boar. I just had the most horrible experience, and I came home and I was like, I don't know how I will ever cleanse my soul of murdering these pigs. And then I was like, you know what, I'll just be a vegetarian. And 4 years went by and I was like, I don't really know why I'm a vegetarian. I didn't have that why anymore because I was like, I feel like my goal to start was to repay my debt to in a weird way to just these animals that I'd brutally murdered. Damn,
that's nuts.
Anyway, so another thing to think about is maybe the pitfalls of going after something that isn't quite in line with what you want, or your why, because there are absolutely secondary things. If you really care about something a lot and you pursue it and you are successful in your pursuit of it, there are probably a lot of things that can come with that, say a Tesla Model S, or
my background right now.
What's that? Yeah, his background on his computer. Or for me, I would love, a Tesla would be sick, or a Ford GT or something like that. But just saying that, my goal in life is to get a Ford GT. Mm-hmm. Why though? It would be cool. But I think sometimes I can get into a scenario where I'm motivated by something that doesn't exactly align with what I'm trying to go for, and that motivation will die out fairly quickly. So I don't know if you've experienced that where you're more motivated by something that maybe is a little bit more superficial, and that motivation dies out quickly, and that's kind of discouraging because you're super motivated about something, and it's why don't I care about this anymore? And it's because it really wasn't super in line with your general thoughts about the world and what you care about.
Yeah, and also I really like what you said about how like there's nothing wrong with having those things, but it's better if it's a part of a greater goal, you know, over like, hey, that's a milestone for me when I achieve this, and this over here is what the actual main goal is of me pursuing this. You know,
Right.
the
Totally.
ending of you know, the why, right? And part of that is because, you know, I definitely agree with you. Graduating high school on time, for instance, doing the 4 years in 2 years, that was definitely in line with all my goals, right? But I was so fixated on achieving that I was like, okay, that's the only thing that matters right now, right? Because I didn't really start to dream, you know, super big until, you know, towards the end of high school, and so after I achieved that, you know, I went and picked up my diploma. You know, I didn't go walk at graduation or anything, and I was like, okay, cool, what next? You know, whereas this thing that I was like, I just spent 2 years, you know, working on, and this was it was a big accomplishment, you know, and looking back, you know, I'm very proud of it still, but it was one of those things where like that was the end of the road, you know, like, okay, now there's something else that I need to do, I guess, but I was kind of felt like I had this period of time where I was kind of like a little bit dead in the water. I was like, okay, that was it. And now the reason for that is, you know, it was positive. It did get me towards things, but that was the end of the road, you know. And that's another dangerous thing with saying, hey, all I want is a car, right? I'm gonna get that car. And if it's not a part of a bigger thing, then you're gonna feel that hit of dopamine, that reward, and then it's gonna dissipate immediately, right? In some cases, you might achieve something really big, and it might last, you know, a few minutes. You know, other things maybe an hour, a few hours, you know, in other cases, you know, rarely more than, you know, a few weeks to a month. So these things don't last as far as, you know, generating happiness for yourself, but because they need to be a part of that bigger goal. You say, hey, this is a means to, you know, achieving that next step. And it's because, you know, and we've talked about this before, and I've talked about this in some other videos that I've made, but neurochemically, we're not just rewarded for the end result. We're rewarded incrementally along the way in pursuit of that, you know, and saying, hey, you're going in the right direction. This is in line with your goals, you know. So, you know, me completing each course was really fantastic, you know, me competing with myself to do it faster. And then me, you know, saying, you know, hey, I'm going to work for this amount of time. Next day, I'm going to outdo that. I'm going to work for this amount of time, you know, and just like competing myself with that way and, you know, pushing myself in that direction. So that was kind of my mistake, was saying that, you know, that was the end of it. You know, there needs to be something past that. Is
right.
What I'm saying, you know. That make sense?
Yeah, totally. But even still, though, you still accomplished that. But yeah, I guess you would be in kind of a tough situation if that's what you formed your identity around, and then once you accomplish that.
When I achieved Eagle Scout in Boy Scouts, where that took a lot of time, money too, and you know, fundraising, all these different things. And I was like, cool, it's going to help me get a job, but I don't want a job. I want to be an entrepreneur, you know?
So, yeah, what's going on?
No, I looking back on it now, I see, like, hey, I'm proud of that because it gave me really great leadership experience, for instance.
And sometimes there are just fun things. Like, for me, I realized that music, with the personal creation of music with writing, is something that I want to do because I enjoy it. Mm-hmm. I do not want to be, like, a rock star or whatever. I want to work on business and like, ideas, and that's what I really care about. But I still want to make music because I enjoy it, and like I enjoy the challenge of it, and it's really rewarding for me to make a track, even if that doesn't have, like, I'm not trying to become a number one artist, whatever, and say, oh, I'm gonna send all my music profits to environmental charities or something like that. Like, that would be cool, but that's not really like that. The why isn't there for me in order to.
The keyword challenge, though, is you're not just saying, hey, I'm going to write the same quality of song 100 times, and that's what I'm happy with. I'm okay with writing, you know, it's like you're saying, all right, man, I'm in this really creative state. Oh, man, that was the best thing that I wrote so far. You know, like you're one-upping yourself, or whatever that is for you. You're saying it's a challenge for you, right? In some way, you might not be saying, hey, I'm going to get better in writing music, but maybe it's a challenge in some way, like you just said.
Right.
So you're growing in that, you're progressing in some sort of way. Although you're saying you're not going to be the best. You know, that's not what you're striving for. But your rate of progression is something that helps you out a lot.
Right. And I guess where that came from was I'm in a music marketing class right now. And basically, this professor is talking about all these different things you have to do to be an independent musician if you want to if you want to like be able to create a career for yourself. We're not talking about becoming the next Miley Cyrus or whoever. We're talking about like being able to have enough money coming in from music that's like what you could do as say your full-time gig and make $50,000 a year or something like that, right? And talking about like, oh, you have to reach out to all these radio stations doing this press promo. I'm like, I want to do none of that. I want to just make a song and put it out, okay? And then I realized like I have to be okay with the fact that doing that is not going to get me the stardom or whatever, but that's not something I'm interested in, right? So it's just like also looking at what you're doing and why you're doing it and being like, okay, maybe this thing is something I can do because I enjoy it.
Working out was a similar thing for me too.
How so?
So I went through, I've gone through several periods of my life where I'll like work out like, 2 hours every single day, and between transit and, like tanning and massage bed stuff there, I'm there for like 2.5 hours, and I'm gone 3 hours because of transit. And that's just a massive chunk of my day, and then, other times, if I'm doing like a full body workout, it'd be like over 3 hours while I'm at the gym, and then I'm cooking all this massive amount of food. There was a period of time where I was eating over 4,000 calories a day, trying to bulk up and add more weight to myself. And so that's kind of a prioritization of, okay, could I get into some sort of bodybuilder shape? Yeah, I could. But I still push myself in the gym. Every time I go, I really try to, absolutely push myself. But I set a timer for myself because, you don't need to spend that much time in the gym in order to get the energy effects, to get the cardiovascular strength, to get the, the vast majority of the health benefits. And some might say that that's pretty most likely running into overtraining, unless you're on steroids that's helping you regenerate.
You mean like 3 hours?
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So at that point, it's like, okay, what part of this am I really enjoying that much? And so I have to set limiters on myself of saying, okay, I'm okay with not, having this crazy bodybuilder physique. I'm okay with this level. I'm still pushing myself, absolutely, and I'm still working on my physique, my body, how I feel. My endurance and my energy levels, absolutely. That's why I've been doing this cleanse. I'm really working on just how I am internally and on my outside, my body as a whole. But I have limiters as far as how long I spend in the gym, because I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder. I'm trying to get the health benefits of that so that I can do better in my actual goal, right? My actual why. So that's it can potentially be a distraction sometimes. And it sounds like that it might be something similar
very
to what you
similar.
ran into.
Totally. So another thing, just like searching and rediscovering that why, and honestly, there's no like quick way to do it. It just is a matter of not giving up, like being aware of like, okay, I know I'm not super motivated right now. I don't have this like
LOL, just don't give up.
I just don't have this like this fire under me right now, but I know that I had it at one point, and I just need to keep searching. And honestly, that's the only thing that has ever worked for me, is just to continue looking, and then you're going to stumble upon a couple things that are going to take you out of that the lower state or whatever, and you're going to end up rediscovering your things. And for me, it started with that conversation with someone about the environment and all that stuff. And then yesterday, with just like having this little shift in attitude or whatever, and just being like, oh, I'm just going to do this creative thing for a little bit. And that just like had a ripple effect. And now I feel like I'm a lot more on top of everything. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because you can know what your why is, and still it doesn't do what it once did for you. Like I've known that I care about the environment or whatever, but it hasn't. Over the past couple of months, it's kind of drifted away from my central point of focus, or my central motivation behind what I'm doing. But there's not really an easy solution though. I know sometimes it helps to like I'll go out in the woods with like a notebook and just sit there and write and figure stuff out, but that doesn't always work. Like sometimes going on a drive, or just like taking time to remove yourself from whatever situation you're in and think is another one that can really help. But none of this is like foolproof. I think ultimately finding your why or rediscovering it or whatever just comes down to continuing to search and not giving up on that and just keeping on until you rediscover it, and then you'll rediscover it and things will be great. And then a couple months later you'll be like, wow, I'm lazy. Why am I lazy right now? And then it's like, oh, I gotta get back in the game, get my head in the game and like figure this out. And it's just a constant like battle with yourself. But it doesn't need to be a battle with yourself per se, but like you want to work in harmony with yourself to figure out why you're doing what you're doing and how you can improve upon what you're doing, and then how you can rediscover your why or things that are important to you when they slip away.
It is a constant process, and I think that's a great way to look at it. And I love what you said about being in harmony with yourself, because the connotation there is that you're not beating yourself up.
Right.
It's a discovery process. You're not overly hard on yourself or anything like that, which is fantastic. And I think that's another trap that some people fall into, is that they can get very, very frustrated with themselves very quickly, or frustrated with the world or other people. I was going to say something.
What?
Oh, thank you. You're right. Oh my goodness. Yeah, the discovery process. I think. What do you have any words? Say somebody doesn't really feel super passionate. Oh, I do have something actually. We'll revisit that question. I just want to highlight again what you said of taking some time to get away from the distractions or the hustle bustle of life type thing, to a quiet space where you can actually think.
Right.
With so many things reaching for our attention right now, and like video games, even even if you kind of lose yourself in music or whatever. I mean, if that puts you in a creative space, awesome. But if you're just listening to it to like blare out everything, or getting into the eat, sleep, work, these cycles and these patterns that we're in, getting out of that pattern, allowing yourself to think and ask yourself some really, riveting questions like, what is my why? Like, what do I want out of life? It doesn't have to be, supercharged, like, why am I so freaking stupid?
It doesn't have to be saving the world either.
Yeah, it doesn't. It can be like, the scale doesn't matter, Right. What really matters is figuring out what is intrinsic to you, because we all have something like that, and yeah.
I was thinking about, the other day, I was thinking about my dog, Huckleberry. And I was like, this little guy here, he's not even that little, he's kind of a big dog, has never, like,
competitive to you, or?
Every day of his life, right? Every time you go and see him, he's just the happiest guy to see you. Like, runs up, licks you, it's just so sweet and happy. And like, the only thing this dog has ever brought into the world is joy. Like, he's just made people happy and been nice and whatever. And I'm like thinking about that in comparison to like human beings. And like, this dog has had such a positive impact on just my life, because I know no matter how annoying anyone is being or what state I'm in, I can go up to Huckleberry and he's going to be happy to see me and sweet and whatever. And I heard someone say something about how there's like multiple types of people. There's types of people to change their world and types of people to change people's worlds. And
you told me about that story.
Yeah, and that's something that sort of resonates with me, because I definitely think of myself as more of the type who's interested in like changing the world as a whole, but I'm not so interested in changing. Like, I want to be nice to people and have good relationships and stuff like that. But there are particular people, Adelie, who was on the podcast for episode 3, I think, right? Just an incredibly nice person, like so fun to talk to and just super nice to everyone. And that's something that I admire, because like if we're out going somewhere or whatever and she's just talks to strangers and is just super sweet and nice to everybody. That's something that I don't really have. Like, I'm polite to people, but I don't feel the need to go out of my way to like be extraordinarily sweet to random people. But that's something where like that in and of itself is something that's so valuable, because you honestly make somebody's day. Like, when you talk to them like that, or when someone receives that act of kindness from a stranger.
I think that that's actually an understatement, because if somebody like I know that there's a few cases, like when I delivered pizza, there's some specific cases where I still remember them now. A long time later, years later, I'll remember that specific interaction where somebody was just, cracked a really hilarious joke and was just really, they weren't just like, yeah, okay, whatever, just give me that. Here's this, yeah, okay. They didn't get, they didn't stay in that pattern, right? They struck up some conversation or whatever that is. They just gave real human interaction, which was fantastic. It's such a small thing. And so after that, I realized, because I am a hardcore introvert, right? So when I'm like, I go to the gym, and I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, I'll go to the gym, I'll have my hat, I always wear a hat because I'm trying to like avoid people, I always have like a deadpan expression on my face. I go in, I swipe my card, I walk straight, I do all my thing. I'm not talking to anyone. I have my headphones in, avoiding eye contact. I'm just there to work out, which has its value. But at the same time, like, ignoring people like that, for like a week after the Seek Discomfort thing, there was, I think it's like 3 or 4 times where I just thought of I thought someone, look, there were 2 cases with two different girls, for instance. So I was like, hey, I'm not trying to, do anything here. I just wanted to say that, like, it was not the stuttery, right? Well, like, basically what I said was, listen, I'm trying my best to not only think compliments, but to actually say them to people. And I wanted to say that I think that you're really beautiful. And they're like, oh my gosh, that was awesome, but I wasn't trying to go on. I didn't go on a date with any of them.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't trying to. It was literally just, I don't want anything out of this. Yeah. Right. I'm literally just saying, hey. Right. Or just super simple things.
I think like that though can be a definitely a why for some people, because not everybody's gonna have those like those desires to do big things, but there's just as much of a need to do small things on a daily basis as there is to do big things, because you could spend your entire life dreaming to do big things and accomplish absolutely nothing.
Yes.
Versus if you just in your daily life focus on being really great to the people around you, and not only the people around you in your immediate circle, but just like everyone, you're going to have a positive impact on something you can do today. And I'm sure there's somebody out there that is able to do both of those those things very well. I'm not one of them, but like I don't want people to think that your why has to be something. I mean, what do we know? But I don't think it has to be something that's huge and massive and crazy or anything like that. I think it can be really modest, because those modest, and this is such a weird comparison, but just like I was thinking about my dog Huckleberry, and I was like, this guy doesn't, he's not like,
he loves his dog, guys.
He's not inventing, he's not curing cancer or anything, but like just an awesome creature, and just so great, and the utility that he has served just to make everybody that's around him happy when they see him, because it's like when you see a dog and it's like, dogs are awesome.
There's 2 things I want to get tattooed on myself in the near future, right?
Dogs are awesome.
Dogs are awesome. That's the first thing. The second thing, I wish I think I do want to get a dog at some point, but I'm allergic to dogs, so that means I have to
suck it up.
True. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's my professional medical
That's all
advice.
I needed. There's 2 things I want to get tattooed myself. I don't have any tattoos right now, but what I like about tattoos for me and what they mean is they can be a reminder, right? The first one is CANI, and it's an acronym standing for constant and never-ending improvement, and it's just a reminder of, like, in those darker times, to just choose to saying, like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing right now, but I'm going to choose to have a positive focus and work on myself, and whatever that means, if it's taking in some sort of content, or if it's doing some deep like introspective thinking and trying to find solutions within myself. And the other thing I want to get tattooed on myself is Kaizen, and it's sort of, from what I understand, it's more of like a religious practice, but back in, oh my goodness, I hope I get this right, World War I, when we dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan.
Wasn't that World War II?
It was World War II. Afterwards, they were like, holy crap, this is the exact words, by the way. How are we going to like rebuild all this stuff? And that's when they started to adopt this sort of mindset of Kaizen, where it's one brick at a time. And I think that as as big thinkers, both of us, we're very ambitious people, and we are people to look at the big picture on a global scale. And like we both said, like not everyone needs to do that, and that's okay. In fact, for your emotional well-being, it might be better if you don't, because some of these big issues, getting invested in them can kind of bite you in the butt sometimes. But where Kaizen comes into it is just remembering to take that one step at a time. Where it's you change the world by being nicer to people, and then you increase that each day, and you do more for people, and then more for people. It's like, how in the world am I going to build this ridiculous physique? Well, it's Kaizen. You go and you push yourself, just a little bit more each day. Then you build a routine. And then you work on your diet. You sleep better. And then maybe you have different friends that are also working on those things. It's like, how the hell am I going to fix world pollution? Kaizen. Go make sure that you're doing your part in make sure that you're not contributing towards it.
Right.
Single-use plastics. Maybe you designate an hour on the weekends or 3 hours on the weekends. With your friends, you say, hey, we're just going to go clean up a local piece. Maybe then you get featured in the newspaper, and then you inspire some other people to go do that individual thing. Maybe you start a YouTube channel. There's YouTube channels that are literally just people picking up trash. And so the point is,
that sounds so entertaining.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is that it's one step at a time. And I think we can. There's so many these massive things that we get so overwhelmed by. But it's such an important thing to remember. It's like, it's just one step at a time. You just start. There's the famous saying. Wow, I really messed that up. The famous saying. I totally forget who said it, but best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. And sometimes we gotta say, hey, like, we may have missed the train. Okay, cool. You needed to work out 3 years ago. Yeah, but you start now because it's the second best time.
Totally. Is there anything else that you have in your notes to talk about?
If you were to, if someone were to come up to you on the street randomly, and you say, hey man, I've been struggling with with this why concept, what advice could you give me to help me with that, in either coming up with a why from scratch, or what would you tell them?
I really think it's just continuing to search, because I've had a thing I've wanted to do for a long time, which is start a company, not really run a company, but start a company that's successful. And that's something that I've maintained for probably the last 5 years or so. And ever since I was little, I was always designing new things. When I was young, I was like, I'm going to start a lightsaber company. So I designed some lightsabers, I didn't really figure out, I didn't really figure out the tech behind that, but I was like, I'm just gonna make lightsabers. So I had this sketch. I think I actually still have it of, I was probably with crayons like this, but all these different types of lightsabers that I was gonna make with my lightsaber company. So ever since I've been little, I've wanted to create things, but it wasn't until spring of 2019 when I figured out why I want to create things, and that really just came from personal experience. I did not care about the environment in any particular manner, or my girlfriend at the time had a metal straw and stuff like that, and I thought it was really silly. I was like,
I have metal straws.
I was like, okay, just a piece of plastic though, it doesn't really matter, until you go out and then you see all that stuff and you catch a fish and they caught a tuna or something and opened it up, and its stomach is filled with trash, in the middle of the ocean, and I mean, we killed it, so we didn't do it that much good either, but to look at that and to see that, and it's not watching a documentary. My dad would be the type to be like, oh, well, they put the trash in there for the shot, because they want to make you sad. It's you could believe that, and it's totally possible. There's absolutely situations with documentary filmmakers that are trying to exaggerate things for the effect of the documentary or whatever. But when you open up a fish and you look inside of it and okay, wow, this fish literally has a bunch of plastic in its stomach. Mm-hmm. There's no faking that. That's a random fish you just caught out of the ocean in a very lowly populated area or whatever. That's real, and seeing that stuff is what really sparked that for me, and that's been a continuous theme since then. And so it's not something I went looking for. It's just something that came to me through personal experience, and I think that's the key, is that your why is going to come through personal experience. If you haven't experienced it, it's not going to motivate you enough. Like I could say my why is mental health issues, right? But I haven't experienced enough mental health issues to be significantly motivated by that beyond just a surface level. Whereas a lot of people, like most people that are like really outspoken about mental health just in the media or the news or social media or whatever, are people who have struggled with that themselves. Mm-hmm. That's why they care about it. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be pain that you've experienced, but I think it does have to be related to personal experience. So a good way to find that why probably is just to continue to like have experiences, to continue to search for new experiences. And at some point, something is going to happen where you're going to see something that clicks. And it was literally just over a 3-month period of time going from like, oh, plastic straws or metal straws are silly, whatever, just use plastic, to oh my gosh, wow, okay, this actually is a problem, and like your metal straw is not going to save the environment, but you know what, it's a good step in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And like just like being exposed to that problem firsthand, so there's not really a way you can just like think deeply and figure it out. It's just through, I think, experience and learning, and at some point, if you continue to search and continue to find, and it's not like I was like miserable my whole life until I found my why or whatever. Honestly, I've been more unhappy since I found my why because it's
gotta keep a positive focus, man.
It's absolutely. But it is hard. Like,
but no, I understand what you're saying now.
It's a deep issue, and it's gonna be hard to figure out, but it's not like that. Again, that doesn't need to be your why. Some people's why can literally just be just having a positive impact on people's lives. Like if more people were like my dog Huckleberry, the world would be a happier place, and that goes for me as well. Yeah, you know, just being genuinely happy to see somebody, even if you see them every single day. Like I see that dog every day, it doesn't matter. When I open the door and I come home, he's like, oh, wow, like that's great. And if you were to just have that same enthusiasm for the people around you and that same care, you'd probably greatly impact. You definitely would greatly impact all of the people around you. And that's enough. Like that, if that's your why, is just to like have a positive impact on all the people around you. If your why is just to be a dog, that's amazing.
Hell yeah, dude.
And I don't want that to be taken in some sort of like weird offensive way. Like a dog is obviously not as intelligent as a human and cannot have the same impact a human can have. But just in terms of, I think you get that sentiment probably. Like, I know you don't have dogs. Well,
we have dogs.
You do have dogs. Never mind.
I've had very positive experience with dogs before.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I totally get what you're saying. And it's actually, you're right. A human is capable of a lot more than a dog. And a dog was able to make you feel that way. Yeah. And a human would be able to make you feel... Anyway,
that's gonna be a clip. A dog was able to make you feel that way, but a human can. That's a clip.
Dang it! Oh my god! Oh my god! That's funny. But I get what you're saying.
I'm sure someone could take that as to be something that's really insulting, but it's not meant to.
No. I think it's pretty easy to see the connection there, for sure. Anything else?
I don't think so. What about you?
I think that people are very afraid to suck at something that they start.
I've never sucked before.
Gotcha.
I've been very afraid of it.
We are children, okay? We were literally still kids. Oh my god. Okay. In all seriousness, though, like you've tried a lot of different things. You know, like you've gone through a lot of different episodes of your life. And not all of them have been directly related. I mean, even now you're talking about how you're trying to figure out, you know, the correlation between what you're currently working on now and your why, you know, because it is different from what you have been doing in the past few years, you know? Right. And so it's this constant rediscovery process and kind of figuring what that is. And so now you're stepping into a space where, you know, like, you know, I don't want to say anything about it, but, you know, it has to deal with things that are not necessarily your area of expertise or what you've been working on in the past 2 years, you know. So this is a little bit outside your comfort zone. And because of that, and I've seen you do this over the past few months or, you know, and longer, is now you're doing a lot more research on it. You're figuring out, you know, what you know, all these. I'm trying to be as general as possible here, man. Anyways, and I've done the exact same thing, you know, like we talk about embracing failure, how like I've done, you know, a lot of different stuff, you know, and not all of it has been connected with my why, you know, and those,
to that effect, for most of the things that we've done, they have not been successful to the degree in which we would like them to be successful. So we really have sucked a lot, and
we have sucked a lot, which you've been afraid of.
Yeah.
So, but that's the point though, is that
Right.
we're, you know, we're afraid of like what will people think of us, you know, what will, you know, like I'm afraid to be nervous, you know, like, oh, well, you know, I get that I need to be a nicer person, but like I don't want to compliment that person randomly because maybe they'll think I'm weird, or I'm sure that person always hears that, you know, or these different things that we tell ourselves. But it's like, just start, just do it, you know. And I'm not talking about that specifically with just complimenting people.
It's very nice to have that impact and not have an agenda, like you said. Like your agenda wasn't to go out on a date with them or anything like that, but just to be nice. We talked about that. I think one time I talked about how this guy, the guy at Paul B. Zimmerman's who commented on my outfit, and I literally went home and told my dad about it. And I was like, this guy at Paul B. Zimmerman's told me he loved my style, and I was walking in there thinking that I was gonna look way wacky in my like skinny jeans and Vans and Rolling Stone shirt in like the Mennonite, you know, hardware store. And then like 2 months later, I get a call from this guy, and he tries to get me into a pyramid scheme. Like that's why he did that. And he was like, "Oh, let me get your number. Let's, you know, maybe tell me when one of your shows is coming up or something." And then he calls me up and he's like, "I have an opportunity that you might be interested in." And I'm like, "God damn it, that compliment was not that genuine." But just like just being genuine with your.
Be genuine with your compliments, exactly, and not expecting. And that's another thing that Tony Robbins talks about, and something that I'm trying to adopt for myself is to do more for others than you could ever expect for them to do back to you. I think that when you reach that point, then it's like giving tipping generously for servers, for instance, is something that I, you know, when I'm able to, I like to tip the same amount as like I tip 100%.
Right.
I know.
Yeah, that's very nice.
I know where your mind was going, dude. Shut up. But what I'm getting at here is that I think a lot of times we think about like, oh man, like I'm interested in this thing, but like, oh man, like I don't think that's for me. You know, like, oh man, like, you know, like archery, for instance. You know, it might be like maybe it's not your daytime job that you're going to go feel like immense amounts of satisfaction from. You know,
I'm an archer for the king.
You get what I'm saying here, though, is to actually follow through on some of these ideas that you have for yourself. You know, it's like, hey, like I want to get my real estate license. Okay, go do it. You know, go like do some quick research. Like it costs nothing to go research it and say, what would it take?
Totally, yeah.
You know, and to schedule it and say like, you know, what's that going to cost? And you know that's the case for what you're actually going to do. But or maybe it's a hobby. You know, maybe you are going to, because not everyone is going to. I don't know, maybe you're going to go work for some corporation, you know, but in what you do outside of those 40 hours a week is you're going to go do something that's deeply fulfilling, you know, and so that might be what that is for you. So I would definitely say explore those things that kind of come up in the back of your mind as like, you know, that would be really cool, you know, just figure out a way to make that possible.
Because ultimately, one of those things is going to lead you down the path that's going to...
But it's almost certainly not going to be the first thing.
Right.
And it might not even be the 10th thing, because we both tried a lot of different stuff, and along, like you said, with experience, persistence and experience is kind of what it takes to eventually find that why.
Right.
Because you do need to get that experience. You're going to reach the end of one tunnel and be like, man, this wasn't it, you know. And then, you know, maybe a month down the road, you're going to be like, wait a second, I feel inspired by this, you know. And then maybe you'll research that, and it'll be something completely different than what you originally started, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think that about wraps it up. So ultimately, my piece of advice would be just to always be looking and always be searching, and even once you found that thing, just to continue to search, and when you lose it, just don't give up, like looking for reasons to believe in what you're doing, or looking for reasons to keep going or just keep searching, or and I'll also look for ways that you can, if you already have your why, figure out how you can relate that to other areas of your life that you're trying to improve.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be a journey. It's going to be a process, like all those things. I mean, it sounds so freaking cliche, but at the same time, when you've reached that point, you're going to look back and be like, wow, that was part of my process, you know? Like,
Right.
there's going to be, I mean, I don't want to discount people's pains. Like, there's going to be times in your life where you're going to, like, pretty much eat shit. Like, it's just going to, like, you're going to be floored, you know? It's going to really suck. And everyone's going to have, you know, different lows in their life. And you're going to be like, seriously? This is a part of the process? Yes, it is. Life is not all sunshine and rainbows. There's going to be some really difficult times, but that is part of the self-discovery process. And I mean, it is unfortunate that these things have to happen, but that's just part of life. You know?
Yeah.
And that pain can, you know, validate and bring, you know, a better high down the road. And you can, you know, sort of uncover a deeper meaning that you have. And so not losing sight of that. And then when you do finally find that why, you know, not necessarily being obsessed with the specifics of this is exactly how I need to do things, and then be disappointed when that doesn't work out. Of realign yourself with the why. What's another way that you're going to be able to achieve that, or it's another way that you're going to be able to bring that into your life. So yeah, that's about it.
Sweet.
All right, this has been the Drake and Josh podcast. Be sure to comment down below something that, you know, maybe like, what's your why? We've talked about ours, and we'd love to hear yours. And so go ahead and put that in the comments, or if you're listening,
shoot us a message.
Or shoot us a message. Go shoot us a message for sure. And anything else?
I think that's it.
All right, stay juicy. Here's the awkward
Bye-bye.
side of me.